All right. Back again. Cabo in the house.
What's up, Todd? Good morning.
Day of 25.2. I am sure that you have been anxiously awaiting the announcement. I'm sure you've been putting together your guesses for what the workout's going to be. Do you have your strategy and game plan? I think last week, what'd you do? You did the workout Thursday right after it was announced, just as kind of a warm up.
I did the workout six times.
You retested it on
Twice
Friday.
a day.
You did Saturday morning, took Sunday off so that way you could really nail it on Monday. Is that right?
Yeah, you're almost right. I did it only once on Sunday. No,
You
I
did
did
it
it one
on
time. No,
on
I
Sunday?
didn't. No, I did it Saturday morning. I did it one
Okay.
time, one and done. Yeah, it was good. When did you do it, and how many times did you do it?
I only did it once, and I
25.1.
did it on Friday. I did it like mid-morning on Friday, which was
Did you do it by yourself, or did you do it like with a
I do
group?
it by myself. One, our classes are kind of so nuts that it's like having one less person helps a little bit. And then number two, like I kind of like to make sure that I'm warmed up the way that I want to be warmed up and that kind of stuff. So I usually
You don't
try to
want to
get it
do
knocked
your
out.
coach's general warm up, what they have planned.
No,
Like,
I
no,
do,
I
but
want to
like
do
because we
my own
have
general warm up.
well, you have two heats, right? You've got one person goes, another person judges them. And so just in general, like the warm up has to be a little bit condensed. A lot of people get there and warm up on their own beforehand to make sure they're ready to rock and roll. And I would do that, but I don't know, for whatever reason, I like doing them on my own. So,
What's up, Omar?
and
Good morning.
yeah, Omar, what's happening, man? And then in workouts that have burpees and like this style of workout, there's no point in me doing it again. Oh, and in fact, so last year, do you remember what last year's first workout was?
Yeah, wasn't it dumbbell snatch and burpees?
Yeah, like 21 with your right arm, 21 burpees, 21 with
Mhm.
your left arm. And so I did it, got my time, started seeing some of the other people's times, watched other people do it. You ever do this where you watch somebody do the workout and you're like, it looked like they were going really slow and they beat me. Maybe
Mhm.
maybe I can do it better.
Every time. Like that's like I have like two little people sitting on my shoulders where one's like, you did it once, it's fine. You're not trying to do anything with it. Like just check the box. It was a good workout. And then the other person's like, that person, you could have gotten more reps than that person, and you went out too hard, and you just need to go a little bit slower, and then you'll be able to turn it on at the end. Yeah, always back and forth, back and forth. Yeah, this
James,
one was a lot more forgiving for sure.
yeah,
I felt fine after, actually.
yeah, way better with this one. But anyways, back to last year's one.
Back to your story.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I did it on Friday last year. I didn't do terribly great because I'm not terribly good at any of those movements from last year. And mostly I'm not very good at like just selling my soul. And so last year I did it, saw other people do it, saw their scores, saw the pace they were doing. I'm like, I've got to be better than that. So I went back and redid it on Monday. And I think I did it like 90 seconds slower than I had done
you
it
went slower.
way slower. And I was sitting like, holy crap. Like it was terrible. And I was like, burpees, dumbbells, that is not the one for me to just keep doing.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
I used to be, Jess. I used to be. No longer. Good for you.
There's a decent chance there's one that I will repeat. Like if I enjoyed the workout and I thought it was fun, or I'm not happy with my strategy or my effort, I will repeat it. But that was one where the likelihood of me getting more reps wasn't 100%, and me enjoying it that much was not very high either. So, anyways,
well, I just when you're talking about what my predictions are, like I've got a plan for what's going to come up. I literally just remembered that one of them is going to be a repeat.
Yeah.
So that we only have two more, so it's either this one or the next one that's going to be the repeat. So, yeah.
So do you think? So good math there. It's got to be one or the next.
Yeah.
Do you think it'll be this week,
I
or do you
told you
think it'll be next?
I'm good at that quick math. I think it will be the last one.
I think so too. Yeah, I think so too. There was one from a couple years ago. I want to say it was 21.3 or 22.3, maybe something like that, where it's pull-ups and front squats and thrusters, and then progresses to chest to bar and maybe bar muscle ups, and then there's a lift afterwards, like a complex. I think it might be that one. So we will see. what do we got there? It must suck to repeat a workout and do worse. I'm
Yeah,
one and
it
done
must.
from out.
It must suck, Todd.
It was devastating, but also when you when you get in the middle of it or towards the end of it and you know you're not going to beat your time, you've got two options. You can just give up, right? Or I have to punish myself and be like, listen, I chose to redo this workout. I'm completing the workout. Ultimately, it's
I
just a
have done
workout.
that.
If I
I have
quit,
done that.
like
Yeah.
to like get to the end and be like, oh, I'm not going to beat my score anyways. I'm just going to quit. No thanks. Like
I have done that. Not I blocked that out of my mind until you're just talking about that. And I'm like, oh no, I've definitely done that where it was a couple years ago. And I don't know at what point, like you realize it's like, okay, if I'm not here, there's no way. Like I'm looking at the clock, I'm like, it is physically impossible for me to beat my score. So I just kind of stopped. I'm
well,
done.
it's just a workout for us
Well,
anyways. And
it
so for
is.
me, I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm
Yeah.
not
I
going
think I
to
probably went slow, like bumped my intensity down to like 50% or something and just moved for the remainder of time. But I'm like, yeah, it's not going to happen.
this is exactly it. The best quote ever. Everyone has a plan
Yeah.
until they get punched in the face. I get that every time. And here's a good one, Marlena. I repeated a
Me
workout in
too.
2022 and only got one more rep. I said never again. So
Yes.
we have so many good open stories throughout the years from our gym. But one of my favorites is we had this athlete that was super competitive, wanted to win, wanted to beat everybody, but also wanted to do better himself. And I think it was the year where it was the chest to bar pull-ups and overhead squats, and it was the ladder to where if you completed so many reps, you got an extra 2 minutes or 4 minutes or whatever it was at the time. And
Right. It's like you're rewarded and punished at the same time, depending on how you're looking at it. Yeah.
I want to say it was either Friday or it was Monday. I think it was Monday because it was a retest. So he comes to the gym, he redoes it. He's one rep away from getting to the next round and he's super pissed, but he's like, I got to go. Like he leaves. He calls me 10 minutes after he's left. He's like, I'm coming back. I'm doing it again. I think I can beat it. He comes back, repeats the workout that night and gets the exact same score.
Oh, devastating. That's pretty devastating.
Really devastating.
Yeah. But good for him, And this, James, I 100% agree with this for other people. Like for the people, I just don't want to redo it, but I will be the first one to encourage somebody else to redo it. And I'll give them strategies and I'll tell them where they can go a little bit different. And I love it. I love seeing them redo the workout.
It is the best.
Yeah.
We have a couple people, like I've got one, he's a former member that now trains in his garage because he can get his wife to train with him when he trains in the garage. But this time of year, he will show up on Monday just to observe and watch the repeats. He gets so fired up about it.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean,
so much fun.
That's everything we're talking about right now is what I love about the Open. Like it's the one time a year that it's just different. Like it pulls everybody together and we can chat about it. Everybody's got their stories and
all of a sudden your scores matter, even though they don't really matter in the grand scheme of thing, but because you have to put them on a leaderboard, it matters, right? And so you want to do your best. I mean, shoot, my mom one year repeated an open workout, came back and did it a second time by herself. It was the best. Like that was probably one of my favorite moments.
I have on video, I judged my mom several years ago doing one of the workouts and it had chest to bar. And so her scale was jumping chest to bar. And as you know, with the jumping chest to bar, the standard is your chest has to hit the bar. And I was no repping her when her chest didn't hit the bar. So it became this whole big thing that like, Kristin's no repping her mom. And she's like, I can't believe you no rep me. I'm like, your chest wasn't hitting the bar.
It's the
standard. I don't care. So
hey mom, I don't know if you've seen the video of me judging Rich Froning.
Right.
I'm a big deal. I've got this thing down. I know the standards.
A big deal. Yeah.
I know the standards and I hold them.
Yeah. Rich Froning or my mom, doesn't really matter. Standard.
That's it. Sky, love to see that you helped an athlete move better and they did better. It's amazing how that works, right? People try to go fast and skirt the standards and then all of a sudden they do it right. And they actually do better.
Yeah, that's super cool, Sky.
Super cool. All right, so love all the open stuff. Yeah, 2 more weeks. Can't wait. I'm sure we'll reminisce again next week. But we have a topic we wanted to talk about today. And in my opinion, if you want to be a coach, this is step one in your journey. And that is to know the points of performance of the foundational movements, the 9 foundational movements. Kristin, I'd be curious to know, did you memorize these or try to memorize the points of performance before you started coaching, or how long in your journey did you realize that it was pretty critical for you to know that stuff?
Well, before I started coaching, I did take the level 1. And in order to pass the level 1, I felt like those were important things to study. So I'll tell you what, I did memorize them prior to coaching, not because I really understood their importance, but because I was preparing to take the level 1.
Okay.
I didn't memorize them in order to coach though, right? Like I memorized them in order to go take the level 1 and take the test. And so I don't think I realized the importance of literally knowing them, right? Like not just memorizing them for a weekend so that I could take a test and then leave, but actually really know what they are until like a ways into my coaching journey. So for example, if you would ask me 6 months after level 1, I've been on the coaching floor for 6 months. Hey, what's the point? What are the points of performance of the deadlift? I wouldn't have been able to tell you. I would have kind of like clunkily walked through, like, oh, you need your feet underneath your hips. And we want to, like that, where it's just like, you kind of explain what the movement is. Yeah.
And you start at mission and then you just push through the ground and you stand all the way up. That's
right. Which, as we know, are not the points of performance, and we can chat a little bit about the difference there, but so it took me a while to realize the importance of them.
Luckily when I took the level 1, there was not a test, so I didn't have to memorize that stuff, and so I showed up and learned, just took it all in like a drinking from a fire hose. But I knew once I started coaching, well, number one, at the gym that I was at when I started coaching, we taught the on-ramp. I think it was foundations or fundamentals or something like that. We had a fundamentals program that people would come to before they joined group classes, and we would teach the 9 foundational movements. And I was intended, and I was supposed to teach it like we teach the breakout groups at level 1. So using the same progressions, knowing the points of performance. So that was step 1 for me. And that was, once I opened my first affiliate, that was the exact same thing, where it's like, all right, if you're going to coach here, you've got to know the 9 foundational movements, the points of performance, and the teaching progressions for those. And not only do I think that's the baseline level of knowledge that you need to know in order to teach, but for me, it was also a good filter for somebody that would come to me and be like, hey, I want to be a coach. I'm like, cool. Step 1, you got to memorize this stuff. And I'm going to have an informal quiz with you on it whenever you're ready. Just let me know once you've memorized it. And it was a pretty easy way to see how committed somebody was to coaching. They took the time to memorize that stuff and get quizzed on it. They were probably interested. If they weren't, then it was like, all right, well, you're probably not the right fit anyways. But the reason it's so important is that if we know the points of performance and they're top of mind and we know it inside and out, we don't have to waste any resources in our brain thinking about what those points of performance are. We can now hopefully be a little bit more present to observe what's actually going on and do some seeing and correcting. If I'm having to spend time going, what else do we need in the squat? I know it's heels down and butt back, but what else is it? Well, then you're wasting so much of your mental resources on trying to think of what else I need to teach or what else I should be looking for, that you're not actually able to be as present as you could be and identify the things that you should be when it comes to coaching.
Yeah, 100%. And, one of the things I also say to coaches is that if you're not looking for something, you're not going to see it. So if you're trying to make corrections on an athlete, but you're not looking specifically for, a certain point of performance and they're violating that, you're likely not going to you're not going to see it. You're going to miss it. But if you know the points of performance and not just memorize, but actually really know them to where you don't even have to think about it, you're just going to automatically see it. I love how you referred to that as it doesn't take up any brain space, right? Like you can focus on other things because you just intuitively know what you're looking for. But that starts with memorizing them and really having a deep knowledge of them.
Yeah. We've got to start there. So any of you guys, I would challenge you right now, anybody paying attention and listening along, Go through the process. Air squats. There's 5 points of performance. What are they? Can you rattle those off in your head or even out loud? And can you do that in 30 seconds? Okay, well, here's actually the moment of truth. Air squat. You said you know the points of performance. Prove it. What are they?
You're quizzing me right now?
I'm quizzing you. Yeah.
Okay. I just got nervous.
Put you to the test.
Neutral spine, weight in the heels, full range of motion, line of action, and knees tracking toes.
Man, that was a little slower than I would have liked to seen. I saw your eyes glance off to the corner. I don't know if you were looking at something, a cheat sheet there.
I have my notes up. Yeah.
Let me Google this. Let me put that in ChatGPT real quick.
We should put it in ChatGPT and see what ChatGPT comes up with. They know if
they know the points of performance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So knowing that stuff, one, if it's top of mind, then it's easy to know what you need to coach. And to your point, if I don't teach something, I'm probably not going to remember to look for it. I don't look for it. I'm not going to see it unless it's obvious and it's a quote unquote gross fault.
For sure. Yeah.
So that's critical. Now, here's an interesting thing and something I want to dive into next. So when it comes to our 9 foundational movements, they build off of each other as far as each movement series goes. So we go from the air squat to the front squat, from the front squat to the overhead squat. So if I'm to ask you the points of performance for the front squat, and those of you guys paying attention, I want you real quick in your mind or rattle out loud, what are the points of performance for the front squat? K-Bo, what are they?
We're going to carry all the points of performance from the air squat that I just mentioned. So we still need to see those. Additionally, we want to have a proper rack position, and we also want to see a good bar path. So we want that bar as close to the frontal plane as possible.
And so when you're going to teach this, where are you going to start as far as teaching is concerned?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And that was one of the things I was going to bring up and ask you. So let me clarify your question. Are you saying if I'm going to teach the front squat specifically for the day, I'm going to start with stance and I'm going to start with grip? So I'm going to start with
every movement.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, stance for sure. And grip, yes, always. Okay, so tell me more.
So I'm going to prevent myself from going down a rabbit hole and just answer the question. So I'm going to start with stance. I'm going to start with grip. And with that grip, we're then going to talk about elbow position. So I'm going to really drive home like the setup position, the rack position, if you will. And which also includes like when we talk setup, stance, grip, body position. So we're talking about the elbows and making sure the ribs are crunched down, all that good stuff. And then I typically go with initiation. We're going to push our hips back as we're still driving our elbows up. So I kind of combine the two there. And then that way I'm covering line of action, but I'm also looking to make sure we're trying to set our athletes up to keep that nice straight bar path. And we do that by keeping the elbows up, keeping the chest up throughout the movement. And then I'll layer on more things from there.
I'm going to take you back a second. So you're going elbows up and hips back, and are you doing line or bar path there too? Or is that, do you separate?
Well, I'm just saying elbows up. I'm trying to get them to keep their elbows up as they squat. I'm not necessarily telling them I want you guys to have a straight bar path. I'm telling them how I want them to do it, which is keep the elbows up.
Yeah. So the reason I asked that question is like, because you mentioned that everything carries along, right? Everything carries forward from the air squat. So typically I start with the things that are new and unique to the specific movement. So to your point, we're going to start with stance. Then we're going to cover grip, and in setup in this situation, it's going to be that rack position. And once I get people in a good rack position, I'm going to have them squat with their sole focus of a good rack position, meaning the elbows stay high as they squat. Once I've gone around, called some reps, and given some cues and corrections there, then I move on to the next new and unique point of performance for that movement, which is going to be the bar path. And I think a lot of times people don't explicitly teach the bar path. And I think to some degree, a lot of times that's because the assumption is made that if the elbows are high, then the bar path is going to be good. But you and I both know that that is not necessarily the case. What kind of squat would lead to a bad bar path, even if somebody's elbows stay high in the rack position.
An immature squat. So their torso super far forward. Their elbows are beautiful in their setup. Yep. They don't drop a centimeter throughout the duration of their lift. But if their entire torso comes forward, then of course the bar is going to come forward. So we obviously, it's not just elbows up. We need to get chest up too. We need to look at the, the overall squat for sure.
And to what we talked about earlier is like, typically, if you don't teach it specifically, you oftentimes will forget to look at it specifically. Mm-hmm. So I'll teach bar path after the rack position, and really trying to give a focus of now going back to what you said of line of action of, hey guys, I need your butt to go back, but different from the air squat where I'm just telling you to send it back and potentially it can keep going farther back. In order for the bar path to stay straight up and down, I need your butt to go back and then immediately straight down. And so by deliberately teaching the bar path, one, and hopefully it helps my athletes to move the bar close to the bar path. But then for me, it allows me to look to see if that's actually happening. It reminds me to watch just the end of the PVC pipe or the end of the bar, whatever it is that they're lifting for that day. And it helps me from being distracted by that athlete that has those really high elbows. Whereas sometimes I look, I'm like, oh, rack position's good. Their front squat must be lights out. And it's not necessarily the case. The other thing with that, and the reason that we start with the points of performance that are new and unique to that specific movement, is that if I've got an athlete that has great rack position and the bar's moving in a straight line, guess what else I'm pretty confident about? Guess what's going on with the rest of the points of performance that carried over from the air squat?
Wait, if your athlete has a good rack position and what was the other thing?
The bar is moving straight up and down. If they've achieved those two main points of performance,
okay,
guess what the rest of their squat looks like?
I don't know. What does it look like? Good?
I would assume, right? If you can get a good rack position and the bar moves straight up and down, have you ever seen that not be the case?
Well, that's one of the reasons that I like to teach at the beginning, like we get into a good rack position. And that's one of the reasons that I pair hips back with elbows up, because oftentimes I'll see if people are thinking so hard about keeping their elbows up and keeping their chest up and keeping the bar straight, then a common fault there is that they push their knees forward to accommodate for that.
Yep.
Right. And so,
so outside of that, and that was where I'd go, is like rack position and bar path, spine's going to be neutral. Knees are going to be out. There might be a shift of weight, like a knee initiated squat to keep that torso upright is probably the only thing from my experience that's really going to be a telltale sign of something that needs to be fixed. But if you've got a good bar path and a good rack position, it's pretty hard to mess up the rest of that stuff.
Okay. What about your knees? What about your knees caving in?
Same deal. I don't see people have knees caving in that can keep an upright torso. And like it just,
okay.
Yeah, I don't see that. So from my experience, it's like if I focus on the things that are new and unique to that movement, the rest of it is probably going to take care of itself. Now, to your point, there might be a couple one-off scenarios where it doesn't, but all else being equal, rack position's good, bar path is good. I'm probably doing pretty well. And so I probably don't need to teach each and every one of those other points of performance. And that's where I'm leading to this as well, is like now I can focus on the things that are new and unique to that movement. If they go well, I'm probably pretty good and able to move on from there.
Yeah. And I just want to add on to that. I see Amanda's question, but really quickly, I want to add on to that because one of the things that I see a lot of coaches doing is they'll focus on the setup position, like we talked about. Now we've got a bar in our hands, so we're going to focus on the setup position. And then all the points of performance that are taught are all the air squat, specific to the air squat. And there's never, I don't want to say never, but there's often no mention of elbows being up throughout the lift, on the way down, the way up. And then therefore there's really no mention on bar path, even though these are the two really big new points of performance. Mm-hmm. Once we get them in their setup position, all of the focus will oftentimes go back to the squat positioning and in the air squat points of performance. And then that goes back to, if you're not looking for it, you're probably not going to see it. And I see tons of bar path issues and elbow issues during the execution of a movement like the front squat, simply because we're just focusing on other points of performance. So,
yeah. Yeah. And to your point, you're not going to see stuff that you don't teach because you won't remember to look for it. So I think that layers on top of it. So Amanda, I'm curious. I need a little more context here. Any advice for coaches who are burning out to keep teaching points of performance in class? Like, are you burning out because you're coaching too much, because there's too much to get through in class, or because you don't enjoy telling an athlete to lift their chest up and push their knees out? I'd be curious a little bit more context here, because in my experience, in my perspective, is like that is pretty much our sole focus, right? Is, well, not, I won't say sole focus because there's a lot more that goes into it, but as far as coaching and teaching is concerned, like especially the specific warm up of our classes, like our job is to repeatedly teach the points of performance, and each and every day, hopefully make our athletes perform those points of performance a little bit better than they did the day before.
Yeah, I'm wondering, the way that I'm interpreting this question is perhaps that you feel that your athletes are just kind of over the repetition of hearing the points of performance. Like, yeah, I got it. It's almost like too elementary or too basic to continue to hear the same things over and over, which I don't believe should be the case. And it might be the way that we're delivering it, or, which ones we're perhaps focusing on, or, I mean, I might be off base. The nature of like CrossFit is that we're doing different things each day, right? So every day is going to be different things that we're going to cover.
And let's see, been coaching for years, the same athletes. Yeah. And so, been coaching for years, the same athletes. So I think here's the challenge, is that that we have the assumption that because I've told you, Kristin, where your feet go when you squat, you should remember that. And that I told you to push your butt back when you squat, you should now know that. Or after a couple of days or a couple of weeks, you should know that. But unfortunately, that is not the case. Like, I will tell you right now that I've got athletes that have been at my gym for 13 years, and I still remind them where their feet go every time they squat, and their hips, tell them to send their hips back and all that stuff. And so from my experience, because I was in that same boat, Amanda, where it's like, man, I keep telling Kristin to push her knees out. Like, when is it going to get through her thick skull? She maybe just doesn't appreciate me or doesn't believe me. And I used to take it personally. And what I've come to believe is that people come to the gym and this is the hour where they check out and their brains don't think anymore. It's like, sweet, I'm in the gym. I get to hang out with my buddies. I'm going to talk a little trash, or maybe just connect with somebody. I've got a coach that's going to tell me exactly what to do and how to do it and when to do it. And I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to go home and I'm going to leave. Now, myself as a coach and somebody who's super passionate about CrossFit, well, I dig into this stuff and I take every squat that I do very seriously. And I want to think about what my knees are doing and where my feet go and how to make that better. But I'm the exception. I'm not the rule. Most people don't give a care about that. And so I think the problem turns into is if we assume that somebody should remember that because I've told them once or twice before, when in reality, it's like they're going to forget and I'm going to tell them again tomorrow. And then they're going to forget and I'm going to tell them again the next day. I know I've said this before at like level 2s when people are asking kind of a similar question. I don't know about you, K-Boy, but do you take inventory? Do you try to memorize what your athletes do with different movements? Like when you coach them?
Like, so that I have an idea from day to day. Like, I know that Jessica's going to pull early on her clean type of thing. Yeah, 100%. Yes. Yeah.
And so once you coach, and it's like your guys' gyms are probably the same as ours, to where it's like roughly the same athletes show up to the same class time. So at my 4:15 class on any given Monday, I'm going to have the same 12 to 15 athletes. And so I've coached them so many times. I've watched them. I've cued them. I've corrected them to where now I can remember what their tendencies are and what their faults are. And what's funny or potentially fun is like, Kristin, you could give me a workout. You could write down that workout and give it to me. And I could think of the athletes that were going to be in my class and I could coach that class before I got there. Meaning I'd be like, all right, Kristen's going to try to squat with her feet too narrow. I'm going to have to remind her to widen her stance a little bit. Jessica's going to pull early with her arms. I'm going to remind her to keep her arms long. I've got, Steve's not going to get the bar overhead, so I'm going to tell him to press up and pull back. And it's like, that's just part of it. Like, we're going to have to repeat and do the same thing time after time after time. Just because I think people come in and check out. This is the 1 hour day where they don't have to think, and I'm okay with that. I don't know. What's your thoughts?
I agree. The other thing I wanted to add to that is I think this is one of the ways, like one of the strategies that we can keep some of our more experienced athletes engaged when we're doing our specific warm up and we're layering in all these points of performance, is that we're not just reciting the points of performance, but we're telling them what we want them to actually do in order to achieve the point of performance. So if we use, like, let's use some, like a clean progression, for example. Let's say we're starting with the deadlift. Instead of just calling deadlifts and thinking, okay, I'm looking for the bar to be straight, I'm looking for the hips and the shoulders to rise together, I'm giving my because that oftentimes will go in one ear and out the other, right? Like, I'm looking for the bar to be straight, stand. But if you tell them something to do in order to achieve that, right? All right, you guys, on this rep, I want you to really think about driving your feet into the ground as you pull your knees back. And you do a couple reps. All right, now I want you to do that same thing, but pull that bar. I want you to think about squeezing an orange under your armpit or pulling that bar close to the legs. Cool. And they do that. All right, now we're going to deadlift and shrug. So what you're going to think is you're going to think stand tall and then shrug. So it seems kind of basic and simple, but if every time you're giving them something new, you're telling them something different to think about, and then it just gives their brain something to think about. So they're not just doing rep after rep. I've heard this before. These are the same ways that, same points of performance I've heard before, but rather it gives me, like, if I'm in the class, it gives me a chance to really think, like, okay, I'm going to stand and I'm going to shrug. I'm going to stand and then I'm going to shrug. I'm going to, like, really feel what I'm doing. And then we add things in. So it becomes kind of like you were saying, Todd, with knowing how you're going to coach the athletes before the class even happens. This part of the class also becomes a little bit of a game for me of, okay, what different ways can I tell them how can I tell them to get this particular point of performance, maybe in a different way or a challenging way, or something that's going to be effective that makes them think and stay engaged, whether you're brand new or whether you've been coming for 10 years.
Yeah, I think that's it. Is, it's a game of repetition. When you start coaching CrossFit or you first get into CrossFit, it's so much fun because there's so much new, and you learn these new movements and you see these new movements and you do these different workouts. Well, once you're 10 years into it, it's not as new, and there doesn't feel like there's quite as much variance because you've taught it all and you've done it all, and you have to find ways to stay engaged and entertained for yourself, and then also to make it entertaining and inspiring for your athletes. So let's see, what do we got? You added to that. What about the coaches that are coaching for the same reason, just there to hang out and get away from their full-time jobs? How can we promote this passion to teach? I think first and foremost, we set the example of what this thing should look like and be like. It's like, you come to my gym. I still coach regularly. You know what it's going to take to coach at my gym because it's going to be the example that I set. And then secondarily to that, you try to hold the standard of what's required through class evaluations. If you guys don't have, if you've not done that before, you don't have an evaluation sheet, Kristin, if you could drop a link to that, that's a great, we've got a great resource for you guys that you can download from Best Hour of Their Day and go in and use when you're watching another coach. So I think that's a great way to kind of hold the standard. Now, that being said, there's going to be coaches that are full-time and take this more seriously, and some that are part-time and want to do it more just to have fun with their friends. But there should be a standard that is set and a baseline level of quality that needs to be replicated in order for you to be a coach at said gym. Now, obviously, it's going to be up to the owner, probably more so, or the head coach to hold that standard. Yeah. What would you add to that, Cabo?
Yeah, I think I agree, having that standard. And I think it's okay. Like, I think it's okay for some people to coach because it's just fun. Like, they've got a full-time job. They don't necessarily have the time to spend hours, diving in and being on calls and all these different things. And they just enjoy it. And I think that's okay. But to your point, Todd, I think there still needs to be a standard. Like, here's what the expectation is. We talk a little bit with Best Hour on like what the ideal class experience is. Like, what's the standard? Does the coach need to get there 10 minutes prior? Is there a lesson plan they have to follow? Like, what are do they have to use a progression to teach? Should the class be fun? Like, all these things should be determined, and those things all need to be hit. And if individually at different gyms, if it's like, no, I need this from my coaches, or they can't be on the coaching floor, then that's the standard, and you're going to have to, handle it as needed. But personally, we have a few coaches that they have full-time jobs, but they love coaching. Every time they step on the coaching floor, they crush the presence and attitude and the engagement and all of that. Are they the most technically proficient coaches? No. Could they be better? Yes. But, they coach, one class a week or so, and everybody loves them. And it's like, that's fine for us, but yeah, I think it's okay, but there just needs to be a standard, and we need to make sure that people are sticking to it.
Yeah, and trying to understand somebody's why behind their coaching. Like, I would assume if somebody's coaching in general, hopefully the why is not just to trade for a membership so they save themselves a couple $100 or whatever it is. And if the why is to some degree they want to see people succeed, or they want to serve others, or because of the impact it's had on their life, and they want to provide that to other people, well, then I think making it known on how important it is to provide a product that allows those things to happen is going to be important there. So hopefully that helps to some degree. So I want to continue down this journey of points of performance. So we've talked about the air squat. We've talked about the front squat. Tell me what are the new points of performance? So everything carries over from the air squat to the overhead squat. What are the new ones there?
Oh, yes. For the overhead squat, it's essentially the same as the front squat. We just now have the bar overhead. So we need to have a proper overhead position. And we also want that bar path in the frontal plane.
Heck yeah.
Having those similarities makes it pretty easy as you go through these foundational movements to find the connections between each one. And it's not like you have to memorize these 9 isolated movements of their points of performance. If you can find the kind of the connection between them all, and again, like the similarities, if you look at it from a bigger picture, it just makes it so much easier to just know what they are.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got overhead position and bar path. Now, in my mind, I think of the overhead position in like 3 parts make that up.
3 parts.
3 parts. What 3 parts are critical for the overhead position?
Well, I would say your shoulders. So externally rotating the shoulders, and an active, armpit forward, and active shoulders. So you're actively pressing up on the bar.
Yep. Your elbows locked out.
Yeah. And I'm not sure what the third one would be that you're thinking. Those are the main ones that I think of. I mean, there's other things, but I don't know. Like your body position. Are your ribs down? What's your grip on the bar? Is the bar in the right place overhead? Like, is it forward?
Tell me more about that one. Where should it be? Yeah, tell me where it should be.
All right. Yeah, the placement. Where should it be? So, it should be right over the middle of your body, like in the frontal plane. Yeah.
So overhead position in my mind means external rotation, active shoulders or elevation, and bar right over the arch of the foot, which is the frontal plane. Cool.
For sure. Yeah.
And
also your grip.
Well, yes, but that's stance and grip in my mind. And when they move, the bar travels in the frontal plane, and similar to like what I said with the with the front squat, if I've got an athlete that is maintaining external rotation and active shoulders, and the bar is traveling in the frontal plane, guess what their squat probably looks like?
Yeah, I would agree. Their squat probably looks pretty good.
Pretty rock solid. Now, could they initiate their squat to keep their chest up? Probably so. And so I would say, hey, Kristin, butt back just a little bit, cool, you nailed it, we're good to go, and then I move on from there. And that's
could
where
they lose their neutral spine at the bottom?
I mean,
Yes.
could they potentially? But like, does that like usually that's going to coincide with somebody's shoulders starting to round or like something like that? Because if they're going to lose their neutral spine, their chest is going to come forward and their shoulder is going to do this a little bit more than likely.
It's just going to look. Yeah, it's just going to look.
It's like you have to work for it. You really have to work to maintain a good overhead position in a straight bar path and then mess it up another way. You got to work hard to do that.
Yeah, that's
Is it
fair.
possible?
That's fair.
Anything is possible.
It is
but
possible.
Is it likely? Probably not, from my experience. And I've coached a couple people, I guess.
That'd be a good thing, like for the coaches here listening. That'd be a good thing to just challenge yourself to start to notice, right? Like when you're doing front squat instruction or you're doing overhead instruction, like just start to make those connections between if somebody has like a rock solid overhead squat position, like or bar path or a bar path and overhead position, like what does the rest of their squat look like? Yeah,
it's gonna be pretty
interesting.
You make a good point here. If you're coaching the same athletes for years, even if it's frustrating because they keep doing it wrong, it must mean something's going pretty darn well. One, because they keep showing up, they trust you, they appreciate the service that you're providing. And so continually looking for ways to help those people, I think is going to be valuable. All right. So let's move on. I want to move into the presses. Points of performance for the shoulder press.
Okay.
Kristin, go.
Oh, yes. Neutral spine, weight in the heels. Neutral spine, weight in the heels. Bar path, active shoulders. That's it, right? Am I missing? I'm missing one. Full range of motion.
You're using a lot of resources.
Full range of motion. Full range.
Oh, there we go. Full range of motion. Okay, there it is. All right.
I did it out of order. That's why, and that's another thing that is interesting too. It's like when you memorize them, you almost you do it in order, but you want to be able to get to the point where you can do it out of order and still know which ones they are, right? Like even it take you an extra minute. Do you hear the jet?
Oh yeah, I hear the jet.
The sound of freedom. Yeah, I keep trying
that's the sound of freedom. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. So one thing you were making mention of starting to connect the dots across movements and movement series. So if you remember, team, in the air squat, there were 5 points of performance. In the shoulder press, there are
5 points of performance.
How many
in the deadlift?
Well, we'll get there in a second, but you guys can start thinking through this thing. There's probably something similar there, but you'll also notice that there's some commonalities across this. Neutral spine, that is in each of the introductory movements. Weight in the heels, that is included in both of those. I can't wait till we get to the deadlift to see if they're there as well. They just might be. But from that, we move to the push press. So what do we got in the push press? Points of performance.
So I will quickly say the positioning of the dip and the speed of the movement. Now, when I dig into that more, the positioning of the dip, I need a vertical torso, and the speed of the movement, it's a quick turnaround from the bottom of the dip.
And there's one additional thing that you've not covered that's extremely important. What else is important in the push press?
Oh, the timing.
Yeah, that one's in there too. Yep.
Yep, it's the timing, meaning quarter extremity. So we want to see hips before hands. You could also just say you want to extend the hips before you start to press.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. So
that is a very important one. And might I say really quickly, that is a perfect example of if you're not thinking it and you're not looking for it, you are not going to see it, because that one is fast and it's subtle, but almost everybody violates that one. So
right.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got 3 there. Position of the torso. We want a vertical dip. That thing is kind of unique to our pressing movements, or those like, our dynamic pressing movements, but speed and timing is something that I'm like, all right, cool. Anytime we've got a quarter extremity movement, meaning legs and arms moving dynamically, those 2 things are going to probably be a part of it. Mm-hmm. Let's move on to the push jerk. What are the points of performance for the push jerk? new and unique
Well,
ones?
it goes without saying, yeah, we want all of the same points of performance to carry over. We're also looking for hip extension, specifically during the drive phase. And then we're looking for a sound receiving position. Not to be confused with a finish position, because that still carries over from the press. We see that same finish position. But essentially like a partial overhead squat receiving position.
I think of that in two pieces. What are the two pieces of that sound receiving position?
The locked out arms, like active shoulders, and then the like lower half of the body.
Which would be
like
a squat.
I mean, the knees,
where feet are probably in a squat stance.
What are the knees looking like, or is the weight on the heels, like partial overhead squat? And so again, like saying it should be like a partial overhead squat. We've already covered the overhead squat points of performance, and so those same things are what you're looking for right there. All the things. Bar is right in line with the middle of the body, all that good stuff.
One thing to note that is interesting to me is that, okay, sweet, we're changing in complexity. We're getting more complex as we go through the movement series. But if you guys notice, the number of points of performance are actually decreasing. Shoulder press had 5, push press had 3, push jerk had 2, air squat had 5, front squat had 2, overhead squat had 2. So we're getting more complex, but we're simplifying the importance. Now everything comes along. So technically you can say a neutral spine and an upright torso is part of that. But if we are teaching the things that are new and unique to that specific movement and they are doing those things right, more than likely some of this other stuff is probably coming along for the ride. So just to know that. Now let's move to the deadlift. With the deadlift, what are the points of performance?
We need a neutral spine. We need the weight in the heels. We need a straight bar path.
As it moves, yep.
Yep. We need the hips and the shoulders rising together until it passes.
That's how the bar moves straight.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've got a little bit of a discrepancy that I'll come with on what I think the points of performance for the deadlift are, but go ahead.
What's the last okay. And then active shoulders.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So we've got weight in the heels, neutral spine, active shoulders. And then when we actually move, that's all stuff in the setup that should stay throughout the movement. Mm-hmm. And then as they actually move, we want the bar to move in a straight line. Now, in my mind, the hips and shoulders rising together is how that actually happens. Agreed. So now this thing technically is part of the setup, and you could say it's the body position. But in my mind, I think of shoulder slightly in front of the bar or on top of the bar in that setup as the 5th point of performance, because I think bar path and hips and shoulders rising together are roughly the same thing. Now, that's nuance, that's minutia. You can think of it however you want to, but that's where my brain goes because it makes it easier to think through it. But once again, regardless, we've got 5. So now all of a sudden I know that the intro movements for each, the press, the squat, the deadlift, they each have 5. So if I put that in my mind, that at least helps me memorize. I know that I need to come up with 5 things for each of those as I'm thinking through and trying to memorize points of performance. Now, as we move to the sumo deadlift high pull, what are the 2 new and unique points of performance for the sumo deadlift high pull?
I'm going to start with the one that I missed on the push press, and that's going to be the timing of the pull.
Yep.
And then we're also looking for the speed of the movement.
Sweet. So now all of a sudden I can link sumo deadlift high pull to the push press. Mm-hmm. They both need timing and speed. Yes, the push press had the torso position, but that's a unique movement pattern to those presses. But now it's like, okay, cool. If I can memorize timing and speed for one of them, I can just associate that with the other second movement in the series. And then when we move to the medicine ball clean, what are the points of performance, the new and unique points of performance for that one?
Yeah. And again, going back to the pressing series, medicine ball clean, I'm just same as the push jerk, right? I'm looking for full hip extension during the drive, and I'm looking for a sound receiving position,
which is that of a front squat. So cool. Now all of a sudden, I've started to make associations across the movements. I know that each of the beginning movements or first movements in the movement series have 5 points of performance. They each contain neutral spine and weight in the heels. That's going to make my job easier to memorize this stuff. I know that sumo deadlift high pull and push press both have timing and speed. I know med ball clean and push jerk both have full hip extension and sound receiving position. And I know that front squat and overhead squat each have 2 things. It's like, all right, those are at least little tricks to start to memorize some of this kind of stuff. Now, if you guys are wondering where to go to find this stuff, if you do not have the level 2, the CrossFit level 2 trainer guide, it's in the level 1 guide as well, but in the level 2 trainer guide, it starts on page 3. You guys see all of this stuff as far as execution, and then points of performance. There's your 5 for the squats. We've got the 2 for the front squat. We've got 2 for the overhead squat. So this thing should be our Bible. And so we should be in here checking this stuff out. So if you guys aren't doing that yet, make sure you guys download that thing and take advantage of this resource. It's fantastic.
Yeah, you can literally just Google it, and you can download it off the World Wide Web. Just Google it. It's free.
Yeah.
Now here's a question for you.
Yep.
How we focus so much on the 9 foundational movements. We obviously do many more movements than those 9 on a daily basis. So how does memorizing these specific movements help when other movements pop up that are not listed there, that we have not memorized their points of performance?
Yeah, I love that question. And once we know the points of performance there, and not only what they are, but then how they look and how to actually do them and how they express themselves, then we can start looking at any other movement and then plug and play. Be like, all right, I've got another movement. Which of those foundational movements make up this new movement? So for example, something like a dumbbell snatch. Cool. Now all of a sudden with a dumbbell snatch, I look at that and I'm like, ooh, I bet the setup looks similar to the sumo deadlift high pull, because the feet are potentially a little bit wider than a regular deadlift. The hands are going to be in between the legs. Yep. So now I know that I'm going to want a neutral spine, weight in the heel. I'm going to want the shoulder right over the top of the deadlift, knees tracking out over the toes, all that stuff.
Yep.
Cool. When we execute the movement, well, that one's a snatch, which is snatch and a clean are similar. So we teach that with the med ball clean. So I think we need full hip extension. So I'm going to look for the hips and knees to extend. And then we've got our arm going overhead. So I'm going to want that active shoulder position. So I'm going to be looking for external rotation, meaning the armpits forward. I want the elbow and arm locked and us pressing up. And I want the bar or the dumbbell right over the middle of the body. Cool. All right. I've taken this movement that's not part of our 9, and I've plugged in the points of performance that are necessary there, because I know what those are and what they look like. Now I've got a strategy to teach this thing.
Yeah.
What about you? What about like something like a wall ball shot? Which things come into play?
Yeah. I mean, a wall ball shot, we're doing essentially a front squat. We just have an odd object. We don't have the barbell, and into pairing it with basically a front squat into like a push press, right? So that means I need to see all the components of a front squat. So the ball is going to stay as close to our torso or our middle of our body as possible. We want to see the hips go back first, full depth, of course, knees tracking the toes. And then as we execute the wall ball, same thing. I want to see the timing, right? That we talked about in the push press that I forgot, but I remember.
And the speed.
And the speed. Yeah. So if we come out of that wall ball super slow, it's not going to give us that hip extension we need. So I'm looking for speed out of the bottom. I'm looking for the hips to open before my arms start to move. Yeah. And it all just exactly like you said, if we know the ones from the 9 foundational movements, then we can easily start to know exactly what we're looking for. I mean, you could technically give me a movement that I've never coached before, and I still would be able to figure out, okay, how am I going to coach this? What am I going to look for, just based on knowing what pieces of those 9 foundational movements are showing up in that movement.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage you guys, if you guys are on the on live, I would encourage you guys, even if you're listening to this later, go through the process of testing yourself. Do you know the points of performance for the 9 foundational movements? How fast could you spit them out? You guys could throw them into the chat if you guys wanted to, or just write them down, or just think through them in your head. But I'd encourage you guys, especially if you're a newer coach, and you've not done this yet, get out there and start memorizing this stuff. It's going to make your job so much easier. Now, Omar had asked a question before he jumped off that he wanted us to get to, and it was a little bit outside the scope of points of performance, but I want to bring it up anyways. Could you talk about identifying individual movement limitations and how to balance correcting and motivation in class? Cabo, what jumps to mind when you think about identifying individual movement limitations with your athletes?
I believe, and tell me if you're interpreting this the same way. If we're talking about maybe certain flexibility or mobility limitations, maybe like if we're doing a front squat, if somebody's not able to really get their elbows any higher than this, is that kind of how you're interpreting the question?
Yeah, when I think of movement limitations, I look at movement limitations as like, does somebody have an injury that prevents them from doing something?
Well, yeah, and that's kind of a different, like if we've got someone that's just lacking flexibility and they can't get in this ideal rack position versus somebody that has a shoulder injury or wrist injury, and they literally, it's painful for them to get into that position, then we have to start changing the movement. That's why I just wanted to see which avenue we're going down here, because these are, I mean, two different answers, right?
Yeah, if there's, I look at movement limitations as, like you said, one of two things. It's either an injury, and if it's an injury and we are not ever going to be able to achieve that position, then I'm going to like learn and uncover that with my athlete, and then I'm going to coach accordingly. Like I've got a member, JB, he's got a fused ankle. Squatting to depth is not a thing for him. It's not going to happen with his ankles the way that they move. And so we squat to the depth that we can get to, and we've gotten to that point and we've been there. Now, somebody else that's struggling to get to depth, but I know that they don't have an injury that's preventing that. Well, then one, I'm going to continue to dig in coaching wise to figure out if I can find a solution. So if I've got somebody that's struggling to get to depth, and I know they don't have an injury, well, then I'm probably going to move their stance, make it a little bit wider, create a little bit more space for their hips. I'm going to tell them to push their knees out a little bit harder. And then I'm going to, if that works, I'm going to stay on them to try to make this the new habit or get them a little bit more comfortable there. And same thing with your idea of somebody that struggles with the rack position. Well, I'm going to get their hands where they need to be. And then I'm going to have them, each class that we do that, keep working hard to get their elbows up a little bit more to start to increase or improve that limitation. And hopefully over time, I probably won't get it on day one, but over time, I want to see improvement.
Well, and I think that's the key when you said each class, right? Because we're not looking to make people perfect in one day. And so if have someone with a movement limitation, you know, how to balance correcting and motivation, it's like, well, what is every single person in class is going to look a little bit different. So the goal is to get each individual person to whatever is the best position for them. So if I have somebody here and I know they can get here, well, I'm going to push them to get there. But if I have somebody here, then maybe the motivation and correction for that person is just, are they giving me everything they can, pending, you know, assuming that I have their hands in the right spot and, you know, we've covered all of that. If they're giving me the effort they can for that day, then I'm going to celebrate that. And then we're just going to push it a little bit more the next day. So for me, that question is just super dependent on who's in front of me. And like, we want pain-free range of motion, but we want each person to get to what their best effort is for the day. And I'll celebrate that. And everyone's going to look a little different, you know?
Yeah. And from my experience, the more I've coached, the more I've realized that there's less mobility issues as I originally thought. And so typically people that have bigger mobility issues, it's either I struggle to get them into the right position to help improve that stance, grip, all of that kind of stuff, or I didn't have the right cue to get them moving in a better position. And then the other thing is like either not demanding or not getting enough effort from those people. And so we get them in the right setup, we give them the right cue, we demand an appropriate but enough effort from them to start to improve. We'll typically get there outside of injuries and that kind of stuff. Now everybody, like, clearly there's one-off scenarios all over the place with that to be considerate of, but
I do think too often, I do think too often coaches will give people a pass when they don't need the pass, right? Like, oh, that's just hard. It's hard to get your elbows up with the PVC pipe. Oh, they probably
Mobility.
have like shoulder mobility issues. And it's like, no, make them prove it to you. Your athletes can almost always do a little bit more than they're doing from the get-go. And if we push it a little bit, then we'll see that they can get in a better position, and then we can celebrate that and
go from there.
Go from there. Cool.
Yeah. Well, if you guys enjoyed this, as always, we'll be back again next Thursday, but also make sure you guys are checking out the Knowledge Daily and the Knowledge Pro. We've got new content goes out daily, and a new video goes out daily in the Knowledge Daily, and then the Knowledge Pro. We've got individual lessons and calls that you can jump on to dive deeper into these topics and how to be a high level coach. Also, if you're part of or interested in Affiliate University, not only do you get great business development, but we also provide the coach development as well. Now, I don't know if you guys saw, and Cabo, I'm sure you saw, did you see this? There was a huge announcement yesterday. Huge announcement yesterday. Super excited about it. We, Best Hour of Their Day, are offering 2 things going into the remainder of 2025. One is going to be the affiliate tour. Those are 2-day workshops that are going on in 5 cities across the rest of the year. It's us working with HSN to run these workshops. So if you guys are close by, you need to make sure that you make it happen and show up to those things. It's going to be an awesome opportunity to learn and connect. And then the big one is going to be Affiliate Con.
Affiliate Con.
Affiliate Con. I know you go to Comic-Con, right? Every year you dress up in like your
Deadpool outfit. I dress up. Yeah.
So
I'm glad you said Deadpool. I was going to give an example and my mind went blank. I'm like, Ant-Man. I dress up as Ant-Man.
It is going to be in October in Dallas, and it's going to be awesome. There's going to be affiliate owners for coaches. It's for athletes. We've got keynote speakers coming, education, connection, so much more. It's everything that you guys want to be. It's for affiliates by affiliates. So make sure you guys save the date for that thing, and more information to come. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But as always, enjoyed it, guys. Thank you so much. Look forward to chatting with you again next week, and good luck in 25.2.
Woohoo!
Let's go.